Creo que a María Claudia le hemos muteado. Sí, no creo que también a María Claudia podemos ponerla como...
Exacto, tenemos que hacer los co-hosts a todos, es decir, a Cintia y a nuestros dos ponentes y también a María Claudia.
Yo creería que sí, para que María Claudia pueda activar su micrófono. Y ya quitamos, los dejamos entrar entonces. Creo que a María Claudia. Pati, ¿le podrías hacer a María Claudia también co-host, por favor?
Claro.
Porque creo que se sigue con el micrófono silenciado. Ya estamos. María Claudia, ¿nos avisas?
Sí, ya estamos.
Ya, perfecto. Buenas tardes, queridos docentes, estudiantes, directores. Estamos muy felices nuevamente de tenerlos en este espacio Empleabilidad y Vinculación Educativa EVEstudiantes. En nuestro segundo día está enfocado en inspiración. El día de hoy vamos a tocar el trabajo del futuro, invertir las habilidades para el trabajo. Les saluda Cintia Paitán, yo soy directora de proyectos de Sonky-Maki, la empresa que está a cargo del desarrollo de este programa. Nosotros somos una empresa que significa en quechua corazón y manos, y bueno, venimos gracias al respaldo de la Embajada de los Estados Unidos, USPA Alumni y Wailai. Y les voy a presentar a Patricia Pérez, quien es jefa de la Oficina de Educación y Juventudes de la Embajada de Estados Unidos en Perú. Bienvenida, Patricia.
Hola, ¿cómo están? Buenas tardes con todos. Feliz nuevamente de tener este segundo encuentro con los docentes, los directores, los estudiantes de los institutos superiores y CETPROS. Seguramente están todos ya alistándose y preparándose para lo que va a ser la reapertura, ¿verdad?, de nuestro sistema educativo el próximo año. Y es importante estar actualizados de qué es lo que está sucediendo en el mundo, y justamente hoy en un tema tan importante que son las habilidades para el trabajo. Solamente les quito un minuto para poderles contar de que dentro de la Embajada de los Estados Unidos ofrecemos oportunidades de intercambio para estudiantes, docentes, pero también para emprendedores. Y actualmente tenemos una beca que permite ir a los Estados Unidos exclusivamente si es que ustedes son empresarios o emprendedores, si es que tienen estudiantes o exalumnos que están interesados en tener esta oportunidad. Yo les voy a copiar en el chat el link para que puedan postular a esta beca, informarse más, porque es importante darles los espacios, y ya David nos va a contar más adelante, el tener espacios como una pasantía y seguir desarrollando sus habilidades en los Estados Unidos. Ahí les estoy copiando el link. Muchas gracias y disfruten por favor esta sesión.
Gracias, Patricia. Y bueno, antes de empezar la sesión, nuestro primer expositor va a dar su presentación en inglés. Entonces, les pedimos que puedan ubicarse en la parte inferior. Existe un mundo pequeño y puedan escoger español. para poder escuchar la presentación en español. A ver, si es que estamos todos con la opción en español, podemos utilizar nuestros emoticones y poner la manito arriba. ¿Sí? Muy bien, Imelda, Janet, muchas gracias. A ver, seguimos activando. Recuerden, está en la parte inferior. Es como un mundo donde pueden dar la opción de español para poder empezar. Mientras tanto, les voy a ir presentando a nuestro invitado, a nuestro primer expositor, Gary Bolles, quien es presidente de Trabajo del Futuro de la Universidad Singularity University de Estados Unidos. Él es escritor, conferencista, consultor y empresario situado en San Francisco. Se enfoca en iniciativas con impacto, especialmente relacionadas con el futuro del trabajo y el aprendizaje. Como presidente adjunto para el futuro del trabajo de la Singularity University, dirige los esfuerzos de la organización para capacitar a una comunidad global para crear un futuro abundante de trabajo y aprendizaje. Como socio de la empresa de consultoría Chart LLC, ayuda a los clientes a identificar y comprender las tendencias que afectan a las organizaciones y los mercados a través de conferencias y consultoría estratégica. Y como cofundador de EE.UU, ayuda a quienes buscan trabajo y cambian de carrera, desde los jóvenes hasta los mayores de 50 años, con programas online y presenciales, inspirados en ¿De qué color es tu paracaídas?, el libro de carreras más vendido de todos los tiempos. También preside fulcrumconference.com, un evento centrado en las estrategias procesables para el futuro del trabajo y el aprendizaje. A lo largo de los años, Gary Bolles ha producido una variedad de iniciativas estratégicas, conferencias y eventos relacionados con el impacto. Es cofundador de SOCAP, socialcapitalmarket.net, el principal encuentro para empresarios e inversores de impacto. Fue coproductor de Degree.org, una conferencia del 2010 centrada en el futuro de la educación superior. Silicon Valley Meets de Naciones Unidas, la US Broadband Coalition y de la Closing the Gap Strategies for an Inclusive Economy. Y es el catalizador de Fulcrum, la conferencia sobre soluciones para el futuro del trabajo. Gary Bolles también fue director de operaciones de Evolve Software, fue vicepresidente de marketing de Network Products Corporation y director de la editorial de 6 revistas de tecnología, entre ellas Interactive Week y Yahoo Internet Live. Bienvenido, Gary. Muchas gracias por estar el día de hoy con nosotros.
Could you try to activate your microphone now, please? Okay.
All right, I think that worked. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you loud and clear.
Wonderful. So first off, thank you so much for the introduction. Thank you so much for the invitation. It's wonderful to be able to have the chance to talk about some of the ideas about how we can prepare for work in the future. And so I'm going to just run through a range of different ideas that hopefully will make for a great conversation. And hopefully some of these will be inspiring ideas that can help everybody watching to be able to think about the kinds of skills that they might want to be able to develop in the future. I think I'm going to just go ahead and share some slides, if that's okay. And so there we go. Let me see if this works. Oh, no, it's not letting me. It says it's been disabled. So I don't know if there's a setting that we need to change.
Okay, it's already
changed. Can you try again? Yes.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. All right. Okay, great. So can we see this? Can everybody see the slides? Wonderful. Okay. All right. Once again, humans have overcome their technologies. So, all right. So, I wave a magic wand, and suddenly you and I are 50 years in the future. And we wake up in Lima, Peru, and we meet Juan. And Juan is a 20-something independent worker. And Juan puts in contact lenses and has an artificial intelligence coach come online to talk about the schedule for the day. It just so happens Juan's fascinated by ancient Greece. There's a group of young people in downtown Lima that want to be able to also learn about ancient Greece. And so Juan uses his artificial intelligence coach to summon a flying car and an Uber car, and it takes him to a town square where he meets a half a dozen other young people also fascinated by ancient Greece. Their contact lenses, that artificial intelligence contact lenses, switch from augmented reality to virtual reality. And suddenly it's as if they're walking along the streets of ancient Greece. I was actually just in Athens last week lecturing. And so they remark on all the interesting things that they see. And Juan also has a skull cap on that has been tuned to the specific way that Juan's brain works. And it's capturing all that Juan learns, and it's posting it, everything that he learns, on what's called a blockchain technology. That's basically an online reference of all the information that he's gathering as a learner. Juan decides to get to work, summons another flying taxi, and goes to a coffee shop on the outskirts of town. Its internet access isn't working, but he's not worried because he has gigabit internet access to a network of satellites around the world, and he starts to work. Now, Juan's fascination is with the intersection of agriculture and space. And so he has actually entered into a competition that the NASA in the United States has put out, asking for proposals for how you would actually grow vertical farms on Mars. Because as we all know, Elon Musk has said we're all going to Mars. And so, and he uses a particular kind of technology in his work called generative design, where he is coming up with new ways to be able to generate alternative approaches to how you would do a vertical farm. And he also has used a breakthrough in being able to generate power for managing the robots for the farm and powering them that actually pulls power out of thin air. Juan uploads some of his designs to the NASA project, decides that he's done for the day, summons yet another flying car, and heads back home. And then his skull cap has captured all the work that he's done, put that on the blockchain, and allowed him to be able to collaborate with others around the world. So that sounds like a breathtaking view of the skills of the future. But the truth is that every single technology that I just mentioned exists today. There are 3 different startups that are working on contact lenses that have augmented reality built into it, where you can actually annotate the world around you. There are several different startups that have created artificial intelligence coaches. Right now, they're bots. They just send text. But there's one called Amelia that actually looks like a human and can coach you on learning and on managing your day. There is a researcher here in the San Francisco Bay Area named Mary Lou Jepson, who is working on a
trabajando en un casco que puede leer las
and get a unique signature for each brain. There is an open source version of the video game Assassin's Creed that allows educators around the world to use their 3D models of ancient Greece and use them for education. There are 32 different companies around the world that are working on autonomous flying vehicles. I talked about vertical farms. The Singapore Airlines in Singapore is building the largest vertical farm in the world so that it can deliver fresh vegetables on its flights. Generative design is a technology that's being used by companies like Autodesk to generate literally 1 million different approaches to designing architecture. And finally, the power from the air. There's actually an article on phys.org that researchers have found that they can actually generate small amounts of power now, but they believe much more in the future from pulling moisture from the air, and as they do that, generating energy. So as I'm fond of saying, there's a great quote by William Gibson, the science fiction author, "The future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed." And so this is actually where I think an awful lot of the skills of the future, a lot of our picture has come from science fiction books and movies and that sort of thing. But the truth is, so many of the breakthroughs that we're seeing now are happening today. So the question is, what kinds of superpowers do we need for this world of exponential change? And I'll explain exponential change, but my premise, and I'm going to jump ahead and tell you what the answer is, at least my answer, is that we need a new mindset, we need a new skill set, and we need a new tool set. Now, in the world, if you remember all the way back so long ago to January of 2020, before the pandemic was really known, what was the worry about the future? What were all the headlines that we saw about the future of work? It was about robots and software taking jobs. But what I was talking about at the time was actually it's the pace and the scale of change. Actually, that change is going faster and faster, and it's also bigger. It affects more and more people. And then along comes a virus, and we experienced what I called the Great Reset. I wrote an article back in April of 2020 called The Great Reset. And I said, look, I think we're going to go through 3 phases, because this is what has happened with these resets, like the global pandemic. There's going to be this falling off the cliff phase of great uncertainty. There's going to be this sort of bouncing along the bottom of the virus spiking and then not. And then we're going to hopefully have a phase in the future where we can build back even better. But no matter how we think about all the different elements, it's going to be different depending upon where you are. Your experience as to whether or not you had to do remote learning or whether you had to do remote working depended upon where you were. So there's a wonderful phrase that's used in Europe called "same storm, different boats," that kind of describes what each of our experience has been. And what we're seeing in a number of places, and this is true in the United States, is that middle period where things are still uncertain. They're kind of turning the lights on. We can all go to work. Oh, no, we can't all go to work. We got to shelter in place again. That period is just extending longer and longer. And so it creates a significant amount of uncertainty. So how do we think about how we prepare for a world of uncertainty? Well, Singularity University was founded by two men, Peter Badiamanis and Ray Kurzweil. And Ray Kurzweil has talked about exponential change. That is, that change can double in a very short period of time. And then it doubles again, and then it doubles again. And you see this exponential curve, much like we did with the infection rates of the virus. So as my friend Shelley Palmer is fond of saying, today is the slowest day of the rest of your life. You're likely to see that the pace and the scale of change are going to continue. Now, how does that affect work? Now, well, the rules of work, how we have worked, have changed dramatically over time, as have the rules of education, but I'm going to focus mostly on work. And you can think of them as sort of being in this constant series of waves. You know, many people around the world worked in factories or worked on farms. And there are still people that work in factories and on farms, but it's a really, really small number of people. Yet there's still a lot of those rules that we've followed from that period that we're still following in our work. And I'll explain what some of those are. But basically, you are co-creating what I call the next rules of work. You are going to be coming into a world of work where the rules are going to keep on changing. And we have the opportunity to create rules, to make work much more human-centric, and to be able to develop the skills that we need to be able to do that work effectively. Well, so I mentioned there are old rules of work. What are some of the old rules? Well, it just so happens that my father was an author of a book called What Color is Your Parachute, which has become sort of the world's career manual. And after he wrote that, he wrote another book called The 3 Boxes of Life. And here was his premise. He said, the old rules are that we had this big chunk of learning at the beginning of our lives. Then we had a big chunk of work, and then we had hopefully a big chunk, but some leisure at the later part of our life in what I call the period formerly known as retirement. So that's kind of what the old rule of a career was. It was these three boxes. It was a big chunk of learning, big chunk of work, and then a big chunk of leisure. So how have those changed? What are the next rules of how careers have changed? Well, young people, you still go to school, you go to vocational school, you go to college, you still learn. But it turns out what we're learning are two completely different kinds of skills. Those old rules, the skills we were learning, were bodies of knowledge. If you learn how to be a doctor and do operating in an operating theater, those are skills that are anchored in that arena. I call them know skills. They're knowledges. They're bodies of information in your head. But there's another kind of skill that we learn that is what I call flex skills. They're skills that are usable in a range of situations. But if you were very good when you were, let's say when you were 5 years old, it was your bedtime, and you convinced your parents to let you stay up late, suddenly you're good at convincing. Ah, great, that's a skill. That could be a superpower of yours. You could use convincing or persuading later on in your career. So think of, you're constantly learning these two different kinds of skills. Well, what ends up happening then in this changing world of work, under the next rules of work, sure, you're still likely to go to school, but then you get a day job, but you might still be learning online. And then you take a gap month with your friends, and then you get another day job, but you're driving for Uber at night and you work on a startup with your friends. And it is a constantly shifting landscape of work and learning and leisure. And that is increasingly the way that the world of work you are entering is going to operate. It doesn't mean that traditional jobs are going to go away. What it means is that you're going to have what I call, in all likelihood, a portfolio of work. And that comes from when people invest. Investment counselors suggest you have some safe investments. That's your day job. You have a little more risk. Oh, that's driving for Uber and getting a little more money. And then you have a little part that's a lot more risk, and that's working on a startup with your friends. And parents ask me all the time, why is it that my son or daughter won't get a real job? They keep on working at all these different projects that they're working on. It's a perfectly understandable strategy for trying to be prepared for a world of constant change. And so those, what I call those next rules, learning is changing dramatically as well. Learning is increasingly becoming a lot more about solving problems and learning the skills to be able to solve problems. So let me just explain how that works. So work is basically just three things. Work is a problem to be solved, and it doesn't matter whether it's a dirty floor or it's a complex program to be able to help a community to be able to solve a problem like homelessness. Work is about a problem to be solved. How do we solve problems? We perform tasks. If the floor is dirty, we go to a broom closet and we get a broom and we sweep it. How do we perform our tasks? We have human skills. And remember, I said there's sort of these two bins of skills. There's the know skills, our knowledges, and then there's these flex skills or flexible skills. So this is basically what work is. Work is our human skills applied to tasks to solve problems. Now, when you go to work, to the world of work, and you go to find a job, one of the things my father figured out almost 50 years ago is that if you present yourself as a problem solver, a person who understands the problems of that particular organization and their customers, you are far more likely to get the job than somebody else. So think of this as the mindset of the problem solver. So more and more work is going to be focused on problems, and it's going to be done in projects. Sure, there's always going to be jobs where you do the same thing over and over again, but a lot more work is going to be focused on how do you solve this problem and how do you do it in a project. Well, if that's how work is changing, learning is changing as well. we're finding that more and more learning, how we prepare ourselves for that exponential future of Jose in 2050. How do we think about how we're continually learning to be able to solve new problems? It's going to be more and more what I call just in time and just in context. So there's a young man named Martin that I know who worked at a company, very boring job. And he just happened to be looking around and he saw that there was this these boxes of a system. It's called voice over IP. It's basically phones on the internet. But nobody in the office knew how to install it. And he said, can I do that? So he learned just as he was doing it. He watched videos online. He used his digital distraction machine, we often call cell phones, to be able to find how to install this system. And without anybody's help, he installed it and he became the IT guy for the office. It was just in time. He learned just as he was doing it. And it was just in context. It was in doing that work that he solved the problems. Now, not every kind of learning is going to be that way. These know skills that I was talking about are really, really important to learn and develop mastery for. If you're going to become a surgeon, you don't want to just watch a YouTube video and go do surgery, right? But if you're going to have what I call a portfolio of work, you're also going to have a portfolio of learning. You're going to learn know skills, you're going to dive in and develop mastery, and potentially in a range of different fields, several different fields in your future. But you're going to keep on developing these flex skills, skills like critical thinking and collaborative problem solving and communication. These are skills usable in a range of different situations. So if you're going to have a portfolio of work, you're going to have a portfolio of learning. How do you develop what I call the superpowers that you need to deal with this kind of change? Well, it's going to be, I said at the beginning, it's going to be to jump ahead to the answer. You need a new mindset, you need a new skill set, and you need a new tool set. So what are the difference between these? If I wave the magic wand and you and I were standing at the base of a mountain, and I gave you all the skill set, all the capability and experience to climb to the top of the mountain, but you looked up and you said, oh, that looks too cold. That looks too hard. No matter how much of the skill set you have, if you don't have the mindset to climb a mountain, you won't climb the mountain. Now I wave my magic wand again, and suddenly you have all the mindset for climbing a mountain and none of the skill set. But you look up and you say, oh, how hard could that be? You take one step, two step, you encounter problems. You solve those problems just in time and just in context. And eventually you're standing at the top of the mountain. Now, so that's the difference between mindset and skill set. The mindset is how we approach the problems and situations that we encounter. And your skill set is your capacity. It's what you develop in terms of your human ability to be able to solve problems. But if you're standing in front of an ice wall on a mountain and you don't have a good pickaxe or good boots, I don't care how good your mindset or skill set is. So it's also important to have a great tool set. So let me just give you the examples of how to deal with thinking about the skills that you can develop to deal with a world of exponential change. And let's focus first on mindset. So there's a wonderful book called Mindset by an amazing woman named Carol Dweck. And what she does is she says there's kind of two ends of the spectrum for how you approach situations in life. There's a fixed mindset, which means that you kind of think you can't learn all that much new. And so whatever you learned when you were young, you kind of use that all the way through your life. And you thought that you might be an old dog, but you can't learn new tricks. But increasingly, we find that if you have a growth mindset, you think of yourself as a constantly learning and changing human being, you will be able to continually learn the skills you need to be able to solve the problems of today and tomorrow. So if there's any one insight I can give you about mindset for yourself, it's to always think of yourself as a growing, changing, and learning person. Even after you learn something very deep in a particular field, if you don't think of yourself as being an ongoing lifelong learner, you'll find the shelf life, the decay factor of those no skills, that information that you learned, is going to decay much more rapidly as time goes on. Well, if that's mindset, then what about skill set? So skills are essentially our ability to be able to channel our human energies to solve particular problems. The problem is that when you're born, nobody gave you the user manual of you. None of us really knows all of our skills. You have dozens and dozens and dozens of skills, but you're blind to them. Imagine if when you were born, the nurse brought you to your parents and said, here's this beautiful baby, and here's the user manual. Here are all the skills that this young person is going to be able to develop. Here's all the kinds of people they're going to love working around. Here's the working conditions under which this person will do their best work. Imagine if you had a user manual of you. The problem is nobody has a user manual. We're kind of like icebergs. We have this little bit above the waterline of the skills that we can see, but there's a peculiar way that our mindset works where all these skills below the waterline, all the problems that we're able to solve, we're kind of blind to. One of my favorite stories is I did a workshop. My wife and I did a training for young native New Zealand, Maori youth, teenagers. And there was a young woman in the group, and we'll call her Kawiri, and I asked her, so what skills do you have? And she said, I don't have any skills. I said, okay, so tell me something you did recently that you thought was fun. And she said, well, I have a friend who lives on an island near us, and my parents couldn't pay for the ferry for me to go there, so I built a boat. And my response was, you built a boat? How did you build a boat? And she said, well, you cut down a tree and you hollow it out, you put resin on it. And of course, my next stupid question, did it float? Yes, of course it floated. I went to go visit my friend. So she thought she had no skills. So she was an iceberg, and there's all this incredible capability below the waterline that she had and she couldn't see. All right, so how do we think about that? How do you think about that skill set that you have, those flex skills and the no skills that you're developing? If I could wave a magic wand, what would the 4 best skills be for you to be able to solve problems today and tomorrow? There are 4. The first is that I want you to learn to be a problem solver, because remember, this is kind of what work is. Work is about solving problems. This is why people hire you, and why if you have other people working for you, you hire others, is to be problem solvers, is to find problems and overcome them. But because it's a world of exponential change, I also want you to learn the skill of being adaptive, of being able to continually change. Because today it's a virus, tomorrow it could be some breakthrough technology that is going to have a huge impact on work. And so all of us needs to continually be adaptive. And if we have a growth mindset, we're going to be far better at being able to adapt. But there's another skill. So I want everybody to learn how to be problem solvers who are adaptive, but there's a uniquely human skill, which is being creative. Not just solving problems, but solving problems creatively, because this is what will keep you ahead of all those robots and software. Being problem solvers who are adaptive and creative. But there's one more uniquely human skill I want everybody to learn, and that's empathy. Our ability to empathize with the problems of a customer, our ability to empathize with the needs of our fellow workers, people in our family, our friends, in our community, the planet. There's all sorts of problems in the world that we need to empathize with, that we need to understand. And so these, if I wave my magic wand, you learn 4 skills. I call this PACE, because in English, that's what it spells. And remember, I talked about the pace and scale of change. And so if we can each become problem solvers who are adaptive, creative, and with empathy, we will have the skill set that we need. And then for tool set, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. You know, more and more technology, these digital distraction machines are going to become more and more of our work. It's important to become familiar with them, to be a digital native, to learn techniques like how to understand your own skills and to do design thinking and collaborative problem solving. These are the ways that we're going to develop these superpowers, and increasingly technology will help us. It'll enhance us. It'll help us to be able to learn new skills more rapidly, to be able to solve more new problems more effectively, and so on. So that's the skill set that I want everybody to learn. However, there's one more element that is critical in the future world of learning and work that I want to talk about, and that is meaning. Increasingly, what we're seeing is that young people are coming into the workforce all around the world, and it's not hard to know that there's a lot of challenges in the world. You see all of this news coming on your digital distraction machine. You see that there are challenges of people and of planet. You can't ignore that. You know that that's what's happening. And so increasingly, what we need to do is we need to think about how we put work for the purpose of meaning in our lives. Well, that's hard, because when you first get your first job, what's the first thing you want to do? You just want to get paid, right? And for some people, I remember I talked about the old rules of work. Just getting paid was plenty. But one of the things my father found in his book, What Color is Your Parachute, is that if you also are good at what you get paid for, you can make more money. Okay. So now the deliverables of the world of work, the things we need, are we got to get paid for it, and we got to be good at our work. Now, some people just stop there. And with the old rules of work, if you fed your family or you put a roof over their heads, this was plenty. But another thing that my father figured out was that if you can do work that you love, if you can use skills that you love to use, if you can work with people you love to work with, you will actually enjoy your work so much more. And it doesn't have to be a trade-off with what you can get paid well for and what you're good at. Now, there's a fourth rung on the ladder. There's a fourth step that you can go. And again, not everybody gets there. And that is what the world needs. Again, you know there's challenges in the world. And it turns out that these four steps, what you can get paid for, what you're good at, what you love, and what the world needs, these are called ikigai. And as a matter of fact, in Japan, and especially on Okinawa, there's a very strong belief that if you do not have all four of these elements in your work life, it's not a life well lived. And that doesn't have to be a pressure. It doesn't mean you have to start doing what the world needs immediately, but it's really, really important to look around you and to see the challenges that you think could bring meaning to your life, how you feel you can have an impact on the world. Now, in the old rules of work, this was sort of like a series of steps or a ladder that people would work their way up, and maybe by the time they were older, or maybe when they retired, they would volunteer, and that's how they would do what the world needs. But increasingly, what I hear is young people are approaching the world of work, and what they're saying is, walking in the door for the first organization they work with, what does the world need? What's the problem? What's the meaning of this company? What's the purpose? If I can do something that I feel is what the world needs, I'm going to love doing that. If I love doing that, I'm going to get good at it. And if I can get good at it, I'll get paid well for it. And so this is how we're increasingly seeing young people determining the skills that they need to solve the problems of today and tomorrow, is to follow this stack, this sort of reversed sequence, and continually looking for the meaning in their work. Now, that doesn't mean every single job that you do or all the work that you do is going to have meaning. It might just be that you're making money and that's good enough. But it is increasingly a drive by so many people, young and old, to try to develop the superpowers to help them to focus on the issues that the world needs. So I'm going to stop here. I'm going to say, for you, it's critical to be able to understand your own skills, to be able to think of yourself as an iceberg and wanting to learn what is below the waterline, to be able to develop the mindset, the skill set, and the tool set to be able to solve the problems of today and tomorrow. And this is how you can continually have the growth mindset, develop those PACE skills that I talked about, problem solvers who are adaptive, creative, and with empathy. And you can continually leverage new technologies and techniques to be able to solve the problems of today and tomorrow. So I'm going to stop there, and I think I'm going to hand it on to my fellow speaker.
Muchísimas gracias, Gary. Súper inspirador este espacio. En verdad, estamos muy emocionados de poder tenerte. De hecho, nosotros también como emprendedores sociales buscamos, ¿no?, qué es lo que necesita el mundo. Y de hecho hemos apostado también por brindar este espacio con herramientas, con expertos, con nuevas miradas para los que son miembros de la comunidad de educación superior técnica. En este caso, los docentes, estudiantes, directores de los institutos y de los centros. Muchísimas gracias, Gary. De verdad, estoy muy emocionada. Bueno, y ahora les voy a presentar a nuestro siguiente speaker. Él es David Rosas del Banco Interamericano de Desarrollo. David Rosas es especialista principal en la División de Mercados Laborales y Seguridad Social del Banco Interamericano de Desarrollo, BID. En el BID, David se especializa en el área de los mercados laborales con un enfoque especial en el desarrollo de la fuerza de trabajo y la intermediación laboral, y en la evaluación del impacto de las políticas laborales. Coordina la preparación de nuevas operaciones de su división en todos los países de la región y es directamente responsable de aquellas que se desarrollan en el Perú y Costa Rica. Además, coordina la red de apoyo técnico a los servicios públicos de empleo en América Latina y el Caribe, Red CIALC. Anteriormente trabajó como economista en la División de Protección Social y Salud del BID. Cuenta con un doctorado y una maestría en economía de la Universidad de París, Sorbonne. Bienvenido, David.
Muchas gracias. Buenas tardes a todos. ¿Me escuchan? No estoy viendo nada más que mi presentación, entonces no sé si alguien me dice si me están escuchando, por favor.
Sí, te escuchamos, David.
Perfecto. Bueno, muchísimas gracias de verdad por la invitación y un gusto estar con todos ustedes, la verdad. Y además súper contento de haber podido escuchar a Gary. Mi presentación de hoy va a ser en español y es sobre la demanda de habilidades en el Perú, o por lo menos lo que he podido identificar con la información que tenemos en el país. Y básicamente la presentación que les voy a hacer ahora está dividida en 3 partes. Una primera parte que va a hablar de cuál es la situación del mercado laboral en el Perú antes y después del COVID, sobre todo. Luego, cómo el futuro del trabajo, esta irrupción tecnológica está cambiando la demanda de habilidades que requieren tener las personas en el mercado laboral. Y finalmente, una tercera parte que va a tener que ver con unas reflexiones finales, si quieren. Avanzando, sobre cuál es la situación del mercado laboral antes y después de la pandemia. Miren, ya desde antes de la pandemia, nuestro mercado laboral en el Perú se caracterizaba por, la verdad, un gran problema, y es el problema de la informalidad. Como pueden ver en ese gráfico, hasta el 2019 no habíamos como país logrado, a pesar de que tuvimos épocas de crecimiento económico muy fuerte, subir de manera elevada la tasa de formalidad. La tasa de desempleo en realidad no era un problema. El problema era que las personas conseguían empleo, pero era un empleo que no les daba acceso, o que no te da acceso a una pensión, a los beneficios sociales, a un contrato de trabajo formal, ¿no? Y eso hace que al 2019 menos del 25% de las personas tenía un empleo formal. Y un poco si vemos cómo ha afectado, cómo funcionaba el mercado laboral, y lo vemos por grupos de la población, en particular para las mujeres, para los jóvenes, como varios de los jóvenes que están acá, veríamos que la tasa de informalidad es aún mayor. De hecho, la tasa de desempleo también es mayor para los jóvenes, es el doble que para los adultos, y una tasa de informalidad mucho más elevada, aunque parezca mentira. Bueno, llega el COVID, y el COVID básicamente afectó a nuestro país de una manera muy fuerte. En el primer gráfico de la izquierda pueden ver en color marrón a Perú, es donde ha caído más. Cuando ven una curva que cae en junio del 2020, ese es Perú. Básicamente, en comparación a otros países, el empleo o la ocupación, la población ocupada cayó. Y no, esta vez, a diferencia de otras crisis, no solo cayó el empleo formal, cayó también el empleo informal, porque finalmente con las medidas de confinamiento la gente no podía salir a trabajar y dejó de trabajar, no pudo estar en el mercado laboral, ¿no? Y si bien vemos que el empleo se ha venido recuperando, finalmente aún no logra alcanzar las tasas de ocupación que se tenían pre-pandemia, y sobre todo si viéramos la composición del empleo que se ha venido recuperando, verían que es sobre todo empleo informal, es decir, ha habido hasta una reducción del empleo formal. Y esto también, bueno, lo pueden ver en la tasa de desocupación, cómo la tasa de desocupación aumentó de manera muy fuerte, pasó a casi el 16% o más, y esto de nuevo afectó mucho más esta situación a las mujeres que a los hombres, y en particular a los jóvenes. Como pueden ver, la variación del empleo entre febrero del 2020 y octubre del 2021 para los jóvenes fue de menos el 16%, mientras que para los de 25 a 44 años fue solo del menos 5%. Es decir, los jóvenes fueron muy fuertemente afectados por esta situación. Ahora bien, a esta situación se agrega esta irrupción de nuevas tecnologías que se está generando en el mundo en general, no solo en el Perú, en el mundo. De hecho, Perú está un poco más rezagado, pero va a entrar en esa ola. Y por eso decimos que ya no se puede hablar del futuro del trabajo, porque el futuro del trabajo ya está aquí. Pónganse, por ejemplo, a pensar que las plataformas que estamos usando hoy día de comunicación, Zoom, para poder estar juntos, ya ella misma vale más que o sea, su precio en el mercado es mayor a las 7 principales compañías aéreas del mundo, ¿no? O sea, y por otro lado, había el trabajo remoto, sobre todo a partir de la pandemia, se ha adoptado de manera amplia en todos los países, ¿no? Y esto tiene consecuencias porque no todo el mundo tiene las mismas capacidades ni la misma situación para poder adoptar trabajos desde la casa. No todas las ocupaciones se pueden hacer por trabajo remoto, no todo el mundo tiene la conectividad. Entonces puede generar desigualdades en los países. Pero en todo caso, eso ya es algo que está pasando en el mercado laboral peruano. Según la encuesta de demanda ocupacional que hace el Ministerio de Trabajo, la EDU, es una encuesta que hace todos los años a nivel nacional a las empresas formales. Para el 2021 se le incorporó una pregunta sobre empleo, sobre trabajo remoto, y el 70% de las empresas manifestó o contestó que ya implementan el trabajo remoto. Así que no es algo que solo esté pasando en otros países, ya está pasando en nuestros países. Por otro lado, esta irrupción de nuevas tecnologías, como nos contaba Gary, va a generar cambios en la demanda de habilidades, ¿no? Y acá les pongo cuál es la situación en Estados Unidos, desde cómo se viene dando un cambio en la demanda de ocupaciones y de tareas, y que básicamente podemos considerar que es una foto de una ventana al futuro, lo que nos va a pasar en Perú, con la irrupción tecnológica, con la automatización, ¿no? Y lo que se ve es una caída de las ocupaciones que tienen muchas tareas rutinarias, y más bien un incremento de aquellas ocupaciones no rutinarias que son difíciles de automatizar. Pero todo aquello que es automatizado finalmente está desapareciendo, está siendo reemplazado por máquinas, y eso genera cambios en el mercado laboral y genera cambios en la demanda de habilidades, ¿no? Y acá un poco las habilidades que se van a requerir son habilidades digitales, por un lado, habilidades digitales de lo más básicas, como puede ser el uso de una computadora, hasta habilidades digitales más avanzadas, como puede ser la programación. Lo mismo para el tema de habilidades sociales. Ya Gary nos hablaba de los flex skills, por ejemplo, que es parte de estas habilidades sociales, la empatía, algo muy importante, y habilidades cognitivas más avanzadas, como puede ser, por ejemplo, lo que también nos hablaba Gary, de la capacidad para resolver problemas, ¿no? Entonces, todas estas nuevas habilidades van a ser importantes en el futuro, y va a ser importante que las personas, que la mano de obra, tanto presente como futura, puedan tenerla, pueda desarrollarla. Y esto genera un gran reto para nuestro país, la verdad, ¿no? Creo que no es misterio para todos que la situación de nuestro sistema de educación básica como educación superior no es la mejor, digamos, ¿no? Y eso se manifiesta en las pruebas que se hacen a nivel internacional. Por ejemplo, la prueba PISA, que se aplica a muchos países, Perú está entre los últimos lugares, es decir, que los estudiantes de secundaria que terminan, que están de 15 años, que están terminando la educación secundaria, no cuentan con las habilidades de comprensión lectora, de matemáticas, de ciencias que son requeridas. Lo mismo si se le pregunta o lo mismo pasa con la mano de obra, con las personas que ya están trabajando. Hay una encuesta que se realiza en varios países, que es la encuesta PIAC, y la encuesta PIAC para Perú indica que el 43% de los adultos, por ejemplo, en Perú, no tiene experiencia utilizando computadoras, o falló alguna prueba básica sobre el uso de tecnologías, ¿no? Entonces, tenemos grandes rezagos en términos de habilidades, tanto en el flujo, es decir, en la futura mano de obra, en los estudiantes, como en la mano de obra ya, en el stock de mano de obra, en las personas que ya están trabajando actualmente. Y esto explica, entre otros, que en nuestro país hay una brecha de habilidades, es decir, que las empresas, a pesar de que haya desempleo, a pesar de que haya una informalidad elevada, las empresas en nuestro país las empresas formales no consiguen cubrir sus vacantes, o enfrentan muchos problemas para cubrir sus vacantes, ¿no? Y el Banco apoyó al INEI, por ejemplo, en el 2018 con una encuesta nacional de habilidades, y se encontró que esta brecha afectaba a casi el 50% de las empresas. Y según Manpower, que ha hecho una encuesta similar este año, encuentra que en el 2021 esta brecha sería del 56%. Las ocupaciones que eran, según la ENAC, esto para el 2018, las ocupaciones que habrían sido, donde las brechas eran mayores, era en profesionales técnicos, y entiendo que estamos aquí con muchos estudiantes y profesores de instituciones técnicas, de formación técnica, así que era algo donde todavía habían carencias de habilidades, y el otro tema era en jefes y empleados administrativos. Por otro lado, cuando se le preguntaba a las empresas cuáles eran las principales causas de esta brecha de habilidades, por qué no conseguían cubrir sus vacantes, salieron resultados interesantes. No necesariamente era por falta de capacidades técnicas solamente, sino entre las principales causas estaba que los jóvenes o las personas no tenían experiencia laboral, es decir, se presentaban a una vacante sin ninguna experiencia laboral. Y segundo, que los postulantes no contaban con habilidades socioemocionales, habilidades blandas, un poco lo que nos comentaba Gary de las habilidades flex, ¿no? Y de hecho, explorando un poquito más cuáles eran las habilidades más escasas, las habilidades más escasas son las habilidades técnicas específicas para la ocupación, pero luego habilidades flex o habilidades sociales como la capacidad de trabajar en equipo, la habilidad de comunicación, la responsabilidad, la estabilidad emocional. Eran habilidades que las empresas no estaban consiguiendo en los postulantes a sus vacantes. Y estas habilidades se repiten un poco en la encuesta que les comentaba de Manpower para el 2021, donde se encuentran que entre las principales 5 habilidades que no están encontrando las empresas está en la colaboración, el trabajo en equipo, la responsabilidad, la capacidad de tomar decisiones, la perseverancia o la resiliencia. Finalmente les puse aquí también la encuesta EE.UU, esta encuesta que les comentaba del Ministerio de Trabajo para el 2021, indica que entre las ocupaciones más requeridas según nivel educativo, se los puse porque sé que hay personas que están trabajando, que están estudiando en institutos técnicos, les puse para profesionales técnicos o técnicos de nivel medio, pueden ver ahí un poco cuáles son las ocupaciones más demandadas, profesionales técnicos, y van a ver que siempre hay una demanda fuerte por personas con capacidades digitales. Algunas reflexiones, porque ya me quedan 2 minutos. Algunas reflexiones finales. Miren, dado esta presentación que les he estado haciendo y para complementar lo que les comentaba Gary, algo que es importante, creo que para que tengamos en cuenta es que dado estos cambios que se vienen dando en el mercado laboral, dado como el contexto de los próximos años, actual y de los próximos años, esta noción de que las personas estudiaban en un momento de su vida y luego trabajaban en un empleo que era un empleo para toda la vida, en una misma ocupación, ya no va a ser, va a cambiar. El mercado laboral va a ser un mercado laboral dinámico, cambiante, y las personas van a tener que reinvertirse de manera mucho más continua. Y por eso va a ser muy importante que traten de desarrollar sus skills a lo largo de toda su vida, no solamente terminando en la educación superior o en la educación básica. Segundo, va a ser bien importante como estudiantes que traten de identificar y seleccionar carreras que son demandadas por el mercado laboral formal, ¿no? Que les van a permitir incorporarse una vez que terminan en empleos que son bien remunerados, que les ofrecen los beneficios de la formalidad, y para eso el país tiene algunas herramientas que ustedes pueden utilizar. Por ejemplo, les recomiendo fuertemente, para aquellos que no conocen, que entren al portal Ponte en Carrera del Ministerio de Educación. Ponte en Carrera es un portal que ofrece información sobre qué estudiar, dónde estudiar, está por carreras, por instituciones, les muestra cuánto van a ganar en el mercado laboral. Es información que puede ayudarlos a tomar decisiones informadas sobre la educación, la formación que quieren llevar. Lo mismo también sobre información que ofrece el Ministerio de Trabajo, como la misma EDU que les presentaba, pero tienen otro tipo está el laboratorio laboral del ministerio, y etc. Recuerden también que la encuesta ENAD nos indicaba que las empresas están pidiendo experiencia laboral. Y en ese sentido, los animo, de verdad les aconsejo a que mientras que están estudiando aquellos estudiantes que traten de realizar prácticas preprofesionales y prácticas profesionales. De hecho, como anécdota, yo entré al Banco Interamericano de Desarrollo y llegué al Banco Interamericano de Desarrollo para hacer una práctica profesional y me quedé, pero fue la manera en que entré al banco, donde conocí el banco y donde me dije, esta es la institución en la que quiero trabajar. Eso fue varios años atrás. Existen convenios de modalidades formativas en el país que ustedes pueden explorar y que sus instituciones o les pidan a sus instituciones de formación que los ayuden a que las empresas los acojan bajo este tipo de modalidades formativas o estos convenios. Y finalmente, algo muy importante, como les comentaba, dado lo que nos piden las empresas, es no solamente se fijen en las habilidades técnicas, son importantes, pero también asegúrense de que están contando, de que se están formando en habilidades digitales y en habilidades blandas, habilidades socioemocionales, que son claves para su éxito, para que sean competitivos y tengan éxito en el mercado laboral. Con eso, les agradezco a todos de verdad por su atención y nada, dispuesto si hay preguntas. Gracias.
Muchas gracias, David. Siempre sumamente importante conocer el contexto local y qué mejor que nos hayas podido presentar esta información detallada y las oportunidades por las cuales pueden acceder nuestros estudiantes de institutos tecnológicos y CEPROS. Por aquí, por favor, les pedimos que nos dejen en el chat sus preguntas. Mientras tanto, tenemos aquí algunas preguntas para nuestros expositores. A ver... Nos preguntan, ¿cuáles son las recomendaciones para aprovechar este nuevo mercado laboral? ¿Cuál considera que es la habilidad principal para enfrentarse a este contexto que está cambiando de manera abrupta? David, Gary.
Yeah, David, I'm happy to hop in, but I'm sure this is something you've got thoughts on.
No, básicamente lo que les comentaba, creo que tienen que asegurarse de no solo contar con habilidades técnicas, pero también de desarrollar estas habilidades socioemocionales, ¿no? Creo que va a ser bien importante, algo que Gary mencionaba, era la importancia de la empatía. Totalmente de acuerdo, es una de las habilidades que sale muy fuerte requeridas para el éxito en el mercado laboral. También la capacidad de trabajar en equipo resale en todas las encuestas que se hacen a las empresas en el país. Entonces, esa capacidad de trabajar en equipo, de poder ser también perseverante, de no abandonar una vez que empezaron un proyecto, sino continuar y empujarlo, son habilidades importantes que puedan desarrollar.
Gracias,
I guess
David.
it's a great question. I would just want to understand a little bit. Is the question for what you individually, like what the skills you need to learn, or the skills we need to be training people for? Because I might give slightly different answers for the two. If it's for yourself, then what we find is that the reason I keep using this word superpower is that the intersection of what you feel you're good at, the skills that you've developed really well, and what you love is a superpower. Like you're going to be so much better at using those skills. Now, there's always the question of what is the job market hiring for? And that is a constantly shifting landscape of priorities. You can, he was giving a great rundown of just, what people are hiring for and that sort of thing. But we've urged people for a long time to understand their own best loved skills, and then to try to do almost a design exercise to be thinking about the places that they could be using those skills in different kinds of work, and using informational interviewing and processes for researching to be able to find where that intersection of skills that you love to use, where there's demand. You can always look at the big numbers, like what lots of people are hiring for, and that might be useful, but that can change. And so if right now, obviously, IT degree or learning artificial intelligence programming or those sorts of things, tremendous demand. But it's also helpful to make sure that that's a good fit for the kinds of things that you most want to do. And then my answer, what should we be training people for? Then again, he was exactly right. We need to focus on a lot of these sort of flex skills, and then the technical skills are the skills that are in bodies of information. There's no question that there's a range of fields, healthcare, technology, supply chain, where there's definitely a shortage of workers. We got to double down on helping to train people more for those kinds of skills, but we also have to work with employers so that they can dial down the requirements that they often have for the kinds of jobs that they're hiring for. What we find is that over and over again, employers are almost kind of following those old rules of work that I talked about, and they're requiring years of experience or an advanced degree, and there are certainly kinds of work that require those things. But there are many kinds of work where the skill requirements are actually nowhere near as strong and as long a list as many employers think they are. And so we encourage employers to change their mindset, to be looking for people who have those flex skills that can be usable in a range of situations, and not to worry as much about the technical skills, because the technical skills, depending upon the field, are so much more easily and rapidly trained for.
Thank you so much. Well, tenemos otra pregunta de Marco Loloy, quien nos indica si es que el profesional en Sudamérica hoy en día, aparte de su profesión, debe tener conocimientos complementarios a su profesión. ¿Ustedes consideran, aparte de las habilidades blandas que nos han comentado, otros conocimientos que puedan ayudar y sumar a que el profesional de hoy pueda tener, ser más empleable o pueda tener más herramientas para poder contribuir a un mundo mejor.
Gary, you want to answer or I go?
So sure, I'm happy to hop in. So there are always going to be different local variances in the skills that are in demand and in the, the kinds of opportunities that people hire for, because every economy is a little bit different. Brazil, about 40% of the GDP is from agriculture. So you're definitely going to find a lot of the types of skills that are going to be useful in developing more effective agricultural processes. There's definitely going to be more work in those markets. What I'm going to suggest is that sort of across the board, there's a couple of different, often called technical skills, but there's several different kinds of skills besides the flex skills that we were talking about. So first off, think of a baseline of technology knowledge, of familiarization with technology, because if there's anything that we've learned from the global pandemic, we're soaking in it right now. We're not doing this as an in-person conference. We're using technology to be able to all communicate with each other. And so a basic familiarity with technology is going to be critical. Secondly, the skills around helping to empower the work of others, which we often call managing or being a manager. Those skills are changing dramatically. The old rules of work were that was a very top-down command and control kind of role. And the next rules of work, I maintain, it's going to be somebody who is much more of a guide of the work of others. There's a marvelous book for those of you interested in education called Moonshots in Education, written by my good friend Esther Wojcicki. And we were just coaching startups together the other night. And so Moonshots in Education, what Esther says is that the role of the teacher has to change. Oh, this is Ulysses, by the way. He always has some very strong opinions about the future of work. The role that Esther is suggesting needs to change for teachers is from the sage on the stage, the really, really smart person with all the answers, to the guide on the side, the one who asks the best questions. And so this is going to be, if there's anything I could urge you to be thinking about, is how to learn the skills of managing and leading. It's to shift to this new model of being someone who actually enables the work of others, what I call a team guide, because that is going to be a significant trend. We're going to find that one of the things coming out of the great pandemic is that we are all going through rewriting those rules of work together. And more work is going to be kind of like this. It's going to be more distributed. It's going to be people that we've never met before suddenly needing to jump in on a project. It's going to become more problem-centric, as I said. And if you can learn the skills of being that person who can help to guide and encourage the work of others, that team guide, that is going to be a huge, increasing demand going forward.
Sí, por mi lado, totalmente de acuerdo con Gary. Simplemente resaltaría el tema de que tengan esto que les comentaba, un mínimo de habilidades digitales. Y también creo que es bien útil un segundo idioma. Les recomendaría el inglés, creo que les abre las oportunidades. Si pueden adquirir un segundo idioma, el inglés de verdad es una gran inversión que pueden hacer. Les va a abrir el mundo, oportunidades, no solo en Perú. Recuerden que con las nuevas tecnologías, ahora uno puede trabajar desde Perú, pero trabajar en plataformas digitales ofreciendo sus servicios, por ejemplo, a otros países. Y creo que el tener otro idioma les va a ayudar bastante en tanto oportunidades profesionales a futuro. Sí.
Muchas gracias. Bueno, también tenemos una pregunta muy interesante sobre qué estrategias podemos tomar en cuenta para aprender continuamente en este mundo que nos obliga, ¿no? Más que obliga, que nos invita a que podamos tener nuevos conocimientos. Gary.
So, first off, I'm going to say it is perfectly understandable. There's lots of people in the world that still have a fixed mindset. That is, they learned something, they learned a vocation, they learned their field, their trade early on, and they want to just keep doing the same thing over and over again, and they don't want the world to change. And so I think first off, it's just important to acknowledge that change for many people is hard. And when I say, you know, I can very easily say, you know, that you should learn pace skills and you should always be adaptive. But the truth is, there's plenty of people that have challenges with that. So I first want to acknowledge this is not some magic wand. Change is hard. And especially we've seen in the great pandemic how each of us have had to continually adapt, and that can have a lot of stress associated with it. But what I'll say is there's a number of elements that we just know that help people to be able to continue to learn. The first is to be constantly curious. I'm curious about everything. I'm curious about everybody. And one of the reasons I love these sessions is I get to meet new people, and every single one of you is a completely unique human being. You have a unique set of skills and experiences, unlike any other person on the planet. And so the more you can be curious about others, the more you can be curious when you see one of these things, you know, not just to be just the basic user, but how does it work? Like the more you can look around you and see things that you want to learn more of, and think of that as a portfolio, that you always have things that you're really diving deep in, because it's really easy to just watch a YouTube video and think you're an expert. It's always important to keep on finding things you're so passionate about that you want to keep on learning more. But it's also helpful to just be curious about things that you see in your daily life, and to be able to continually give yourself goals. So what we find is that staying constantly curious, and then giving yourself goals, whether it's a certain number of courses to take in a week. But I'm not going to try to sell this out. Hopefully you have a way of being able to see these courses without having to pay for them. Maybe your school does that, or on LinkedIn Learning, I have 2 courses. One is called Learning Agility, and one is called A Learning Mindset. And I talk about exactly how you do this, like how you go through the steps of staying curious and building the goals for learning. And these, once learned, you can't forget these skills. It's like you just become like a learning junkie. And so that's my urge to you, is to keep on learning that skill set of how you can learning to learn, and then always being curious about the next thing that you want to learn.
Gracias, Gary.
Beth thought that was a funny one.
Muchísimas gracias, Gary.
No tengo mucho que agregar, simplemente creo que lo que decía Gary, de ser siempre curioso, de tener metas, y la verdad, con las nuevas tecnologías, ha aparecido una oferta de cursos muy variada que uno puede aprovechar para ir mejorando sus habilidades de manera continua, ¿no? Entonces, si la oferta de cursos no está disponible en el Perú, pueden tomar cursos como el curso que ha hecho Gary, que mencionaba, o cursos de Coursera, o cursos o bootcamps. Hay MOOCs, hay una oferta muy amplia de cursos que que está abierta y que ustedes pueden aprovechar para ir mejorando sus habilidades y complementando lo que saben, ¿no? Y siendo mejorando su perfil ocupacional continuamente.
Muchísimas gracias, David y Gary. Bueno, como pregunta para ir cerrando, y bueno, también es parte un poco de la preocupación de los estudiantes y de los docentes, considerando el mundo actual en el que estamos viviendo y los cambios en relación a la tecnología, ¿cuáles consideran que son los empleos que serán reemplazados por la automatización en los tiempos futuros? O sea, ¿cómo podríamos prepararnos para ello? Gary, no sé si nos puedas compartir un poco, considerando el contexto de Perú y cómo podemos ver
Yeah,
qué
I have
tipo de
10 more
carreras
minutes. I
van a
was able to
ser.
push it back a little bit, so I have 10 more minutes. So I'm sorry, so Ulysses was being very vocal. Yeah.
Don't worry. Gary, no sé si es que tú nos quieres compartir un poco el contexto a nivel Perú para poder pasar a la mirada de Gary a nivel global, cómo la automatización está de alguna forma reduciendo algunos empleos y cómo podremos prepararnos ante ello.
Yeah, so I'll just offer my way of articulating this, and David will have far more actual detail on the specifics. So here's the way I think of it: is think of work, think of the problems that we solve, think of as sort of having two axes, right? So on this axis, it's how unique the problem is. Is it a same problem over and over again that you need to solve? You need to put two widgets together, and that's kind of it. And at this end, it's very unique. It's a completely unusual problem to be solved. And at this end, in this axis, it's a problem that just needs analysis, just like you need just to basically just break it down, and it's a pretty simple process of understanding its elements. And at this end, it takes very creative problem solving. So think of it as a landscape. Down here, it's repetitive tasks that can be sort of broken down into different steps. And that is the realm of robots and software. That's the work that's going to get automated. If it's repetitive, it's the same thing over and over again. It doesn't require you to think a whole bunch, at least not think creatively. It's going to get automated. There's robots and software are going to take that work. And up here, if it's unique problems to solve, if it's creative problem solving that's needed, if it's collaborative problem solving with other people, if it requires empathy, up here in the upper corner, those are the jobs that are going to last, because it's just harder to build technology to solve those problems. So if you keep on moving up, you keep on finding the problems that you love to solve that are unique, the kinds of work that, so you know that right now programming, there's a lot of opportunity in programming. But there's going to be software that's going to eventually write programs more and more effectively. And so there's a lot of programming that is going to eventually be automated itself. That doesn't mean you shouldn't become a programmer. Go ahead, be a programmer. Just always keep trying to find creative problems to solve when you learn that skill set.
Sí, no tengo mucho que completar. Estoy totalmente alineado con lo que dice Gary. Simplemente piensen en ocupaciones también donde tienen una interacción con las personas que no puede tener un robot, ¿no? Por ejemplo, a veces la gente piensa que personas que van a trabajar recibiendo a los clientes o en un restaurante, personas que atienden a las personas, eso quizás un robot no lo puede hacer porque el robot no va a tener la empatía, la capacidad de recibir a las personas, de interactuar con ellas, ¿no? Pero, por ejemplo, puede ser que una tarea como, no sé, montar cajas en un almacén, es un robot que no es creativo, que es repetitivo, es un robot, lo va a poder reemplazar de manera muy fácil, ¿no? Y entonces, nada, yo creo que ahí solo complementaría con esto, no tengo mucho más que decir.
Muchas gracias, David. Y bueno, para compartirles un poco del ejemplo, cómo podemos llegar a Gary y a David, justamente yo manejo del nivel de inglés y es a través de ello que pude contactarme con Gary, utilizando una plataforma muy conocida laboralmente o profesionalmente, que es LinkedIn, ¿no? Entonces, de hecho, eso me ayudó a llegar a Gary. Para llegar a David, por ejemplo, también fue una búsqueda de cómo el Banco Interamericano de Desarrollo está desarrollando investigación en temas de la empleabilidad juvenil, las nuevas habilidades, la búsqueda laboral y cómo se está desarrollando a nivel Latinoamérica y Perú. Entonces, es un ejemplo muy sencillo en el que les podemos mostrar que teniendo ciertas habilidades, conocimientos, podemos desarrollar espacios como este, ¿no? En el que les podemos brindar a ustedes conocimientos, nuevas perspectivas de cómo seguir avanzando por nosotros y para nosotros, que es parte del lema también que manejamos en Sonco y Maki, ¿no? Como laboratorio de innovación social. Así que muchísimas gracias, Gary, muchísimas gracias, David, por haber estado en este espacio muy enriquecedor. Gracias a nuestros docentes y estudiantes de los Institutos Superiores Tecnológicos. El día de mañana nos encontramos para nuestro siguiente espacio, justamente para compartir conocimiento a través de herramientas. Y vamos a tener herramientas de empleabilidad a cargo de nuestra compañera Beth González de STEAM Perú. Así que para cerrar...
Thank you so much.
Muchas gracias.
So wonderful to meet you all.
Sí, de verdad, muchísimas gracias por
much.
la invitación. Hasta aquí, suerte y éxito con todos y ahí seguimos en contacto. Cuídense.
Gracias. Solo un minutito más. La foto final para poder cerrar el evento. Se nos fue Gary. Pero
Sí,
bueno,
fue
la
Gary.
verdad, sí, estaba ya con el tiempo él. Así que muchísimas gracias. Y como saben, les invitamos a que puedan prender sus cámaras y poder activar, como siempre, nosotros, como les decimos, hacemos este corazoncito, corazón y manos. Y si es que no pueden, así como está haciendo Víctor, Groma también por ahí activó su emoticón en corazoncito, como está haciendo Loet, bienvenidos. A ver, los esperamos 3 segundos, si es que pueden prender sus cámaras, nos ayudaría muchísimo a verlos, porque ya nos vienen acompañando algunas semanas. Y nos alegra mucho saber que están con nosotros en este espacio que creamos con mucho cariño. A ver, ya estamos, creo, Bet.
Perfecto, muy bien,
¿Se les hago
muchísimas
así
gracias.
también? ¿Algo así?
Por supuesto, muchas gracias. Perfecto, voy a comenzar, así que sus mejores sonrisas, por favor. Aquí vamos, la primera. Tienen que tener paciencia porque somos varios, así que mantenemos nuestras sonrisas, ahí muy bien. Gracias, muchas gracias a los que están prendiendo sus camaritas. Muchas gracias a los que nos han acompañado el día de hoy. Listo, una más. Muy bien. Listo, muchísimas gracias. Ya estamos con las fotos.
Gracias.
Hasta luego,
Nos vemos
cuídense
mañana
mucho.
a la misma hora. Un fuerte
Gracias,
abrazo.
David. Nos vemos mañana. Listo. Muchas gracias a todos. Gracias.
Gracias.
Hasta mañana.